invite both our speakers to discuss how the COVID-19 situation has aggravated mental health issues. What are the main issues and concerns, especially with the young student population? What could be the long-term effects? I think we really need to ponder on these. We need to discuss these, and then maybe we can come up with solutions. So maybe, Gisela, would you like to go first?
Okay. So now we are talking about a really big issue, something that we cannot solve quickly, because in order to deal with such issues, we need to have a wider and larger perspective and understand the reality of human life itself, and understand the nature of the psychophysical aggregate that we have itself. Now, if we look at the psychophysical aggregate itself, at least from the Buddhist viewpoint, that if you look at your physical body itself, this physical body itself is of such a nature that it is susceptible and prone to all kinds of illnesses, of course, including COVID-19, all kinds of illnesses. And the so-called happiness that we try to develop is not so much from the body itself. It has to be sought from somewhere else, either from temporary pleasure from outside, or some other kind of fleeting happinesses from outside, or maybe through the mind. But body, the nature of the body itself is that it is prone to illnesses, sicknesses. So we need to first of all understand that situation. That's why, because of this, the Buddha compared the physical body as a foam, as a water bubble and things like that. So very fragile. We need to understand this. Once we understand this fragility, then we need to understand that I want not only happiness but long-term happiness. But given the nature of my psychophysical aggregate, especially the body, it's really fragile. So I need to take care of it. We have to have that conviction and that understanding. If you don't have this understanding and pretend that everything is okay, if I have do some exercise and get some good food, and when I'm sick, take some medicine, then everything will be all right, is absolutely a misplaced trust. So it's very important to know that. So therefore, here it is important to know, when we experience like COVID-19, problems and things like that, one thing that we need to know is, we are talking about COVID-19 right now because that is the thing that is bothering us most right now. But otherwise, in the society, look at all kinds of pandemics of bad friend, terrorism, raping and killing, and people dying from other diseases, in one day, I don't know how many, if not millions, how many, several 100,000 people are dying every day if we maintain a counting of that. So from that point, it's in a way a little bit frightening, you see. But there's nothing to, get frightened if you understand the situation. Then you will be able to understand that the most of the problem that we are facing is not just because of the body, but because of our negative attitude. In Buddhism, we call it negative emotions of anger, of jealousy, of hatred, and most importantly, the ignorance. Ignorance, not just lack of knowledge, but misconception of the reality. And it is because of this perverted confusion, misconception of the reality, that we develop all other kinds of negative emotions. Yes, there is a little bit disagreement, I think, between science and Buddhism, because according to science that I know a little bit, all emotions are necessary. There is nothing called negative or positive. That's why they come up with this famous phrase, which is called fight and flight response. If you don't have these negative emotions, you will not be able to run away. You will not be able to fight. You need these negative emotions. But in Buddhism, we talk about, completely reducing and completely getting rid of the negative emotions. Still, maintain your sanity. Buddha is the classic example. He's somebody said to be having no negative emotion at all, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have this, empathy and compassion and love. All this is possible. So I think this is a very important point to be noted down. But even if you like make a distinction, as Dr. Monish has made, a difference between depression and severe depression, things like that. But from that also we can know that any of these negative emotions, if they become more than what is needed, let us agree for a moment on that level, more than needed, then you are going to get big problem. So therefore, we need to come up with a education system where these negative emotions like anger and jealousy with proper, now I'm glad that Palawan has this research, practices also. So we need to do a research, let us say the destructiveness of anger. And we have to be honest with anger, if it is really, really useful, okay, we can have it. Okay, unbiased research and see how good anger is for individual, for the society, for the nation, for the whole world. And then similarly attachment, similarly ignorance. So therefore, the point that I'm really making here is two things, as I briefly mentioned earlier also. Now, when we say I'm scared of the COVID-19 or things like that, what we are saying is I don't want any of this disease, any of these problems. I want happiness. So when we talk about happiness, we are talking about mental satisfaction. Having done the right thing, having lived the right life, you have this total satisfaction and calmness. That is called happiness. And that is determined in terms of the level of the mind and not on the level, not so much on the level of the body. But the problem that we are having, especially in the modern world, is we are paying so much attention to this body and thereby anything that is material outside. And that is how the market and the business and everything, the countless productions that is made, the science and technology, all this are a result of our paying too much attention to the physical, the material, and not paying attention to the mind. So when we, despite all this science and technology and seemingly beautiful material development, in terms of actual peace and calmness and tranquility of the mind of human beings, I doubt whether we are better than some generations before today. Yes, physically, externally, yes, you look good, everything looks good, but but in terms of genuine satisfaction or happiness, I have a big question about this. So at least from my point of view, if we need this long-term solution, including this, problem created by the COVID-19 right now, what do we need to? We need to learn from this. Again, we have a big problem as human beings. Human beings' memory is very short. I always, when I talk about short memory, I always think about the elections in India, You elect one party this year, and then after 4 years, next party, then after 4 years, the same next party, you forget already what they have done before, right? So similarly, I am very, very scared that if the vaccine solves some of the problem, then in the name of normalcy, we'll resort to all the unchecked behavior, negative behavior, and inviting other pandemics, other diseases, and so forth. Now it is scientifically, proved and explained that more than 60–70% of the human illnesses and sicknesses, including the COVID-19 that we are experiencing, comes because of our, negative relation, negative behavior with other species, other animals. So we need to, if we really want to get a normal state of life, we need to change our behavior relation, not only with human beings, but with the whole environment, with the whole species of the birds, animals, and things like that. We need to realize that this world, this earth does not belong to human beings alone. It belongs to the whole, species of, not only human beings, but animals, birds, and so forth. So through that way, we need to develop this understanding that as we both of us has agreed that here also we need to develop this balanced way of life towards everything. So in short, you know, uh, coexistence and things like that, right? So that's all I want to say right now. Yeah.
Right. That's a wonderful discussion. That what we are looking at is a mental health issue, which comes from the imbalance that we have created within ourselves and also in relation to nature and everybody else around us. And what is that what is that internal factor and what is the external factor. We may disagree from the point of view of psychology and from the point of view of Buddhist philosophy, but it is agreed that it is the imbalance that creates the problems. So when we have these imbalance right now, Monisha, would you like to talk about what could be the long-term effects? What could be the effect on the young students as well as maybe parents, the elderly, everybody in fact? I mean, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I want to pick up from where Gisela so wisely, I mean, I'm so accurately pointed out that it's all about the mind and the body. It's in the mind that the work gets done, right? And I think that I have a deep respect because that is where I've immersed myself in understanding the mind. The point of disagreement may be as to how we deal with what goes on in the mind. That may be from my psychological perspective. So I think that what is the attention is now very profoundly, and for good reason, on the pandemic. So let me cast the lens of it being a traumatic event, right? If it's a traumatic event, and I deal with a lot of trauma, people have all kinds of emotions. And Gisela, you're right. I don't label emotions as being good or bad. In the mind, we feel all kinds of feelings, good and not so good feelings that our bodies don't like and we want to reject it, etc. In the mind, we can feel anything. But I make a distinction between mind, the emotions, feelings, and actions. Actions have to be thought about, actions have to be intentional, actions have to be purposeful. So that's the distinction I make. So when we're dealing with something traumatic, we're talking about this, right? So that's one distinction. Now, what are we saying when we talk about what's happening in a traumatic situation? What do children need? What do people need in general? If you want to go across, they need a stable living environment. They need to have adequate food, proper nutrition, right? They need to have, children especially need discipline, even adults need like a routine in their lives, and also physical exercise for children and young people, and even for older people, being able to go out, socialize, meet each other, for children to play with other children, to go to school. These are very necessary functions for development, social, cognitive, emotional development in life. That has been interrupted. So in a variety of ways, as you said, which pointed out, we have children are not able to go to school. We have hybrid learning. We know how children, and young adults, etc., are using videos and computers, and we don't quite know what the impact of such heavy exposure to hybrid learning through, computer use will have on the brain. We don't know. We don't know in terms of the impact it'll have on attention. We don't know the impact it'll have on concentration. We do know that that's where school learning all around in the world, that's how it's occurring. It's having an impact on families in terms of financial impact, social structures. Families are finding themselves feeling very depressed and anxious. There is an increase in marital conflicts. People are taking it out on each other. So why is this happening? Why is this happening that this is now going into such action? That is something that one can think about psychologically in terms of that when people are afraid and when things are uncertain, and if their internal structures for ego resiliency and modulation are disrupted to a point that we all have a threshold, so to speak. And if that threshold is crossed, and everyone's threshold may vary depending on a lot of structures that have developed during their lifetime, the work that they've done, including the use of meditation, which I think is a very powerful tool to be able to go in oneself and being able to build resiliency. These are very powerful tools, but there are many different aspects of how one can build resiliency. So once the threshold is crossed, so to speak, and that may vary from family to family, from individual to individual, age group, gender, etc., that people become either very feel very debilitated, get very angry, feel frightened, feel very confused, disoriented, and that's when it starts to get into action. Right? And right now, as you, Gisela, you pointed out, if we don't have a system in place that is helping us manage that, there is an increase, whether it is at the family level in terms of the support structures, in terms of parents' mental health, in terms of societal information or misinformation, and in terms of what schools are willing to be able to help the children understand. Too much information is not necessarily good, but also accurate information is necessary. One of the things I've begun, because it does have social impacts and economic impacts, everything is being disrupted. One of the things I use with my patients, and this is trying to bring in what you talked about, Gisela, is this whole attitude of being able to live with nature, right? And we'll get into this in the solutions when we talk about this, is being able to think about caring and sharing. I use this word care and share. So you care about someone, you care about a plant, you care about an animal, bring in other aspects of one's functioning that allows we share a space. This is something that just simple things like that, which we instill, and we'll talk more about that in the solutions thing. But you have to remember that there is a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't know what's going on in terms of the vaccine. We know there is something around the corner. We don't know what the long-term impacts of this will be on children, especially when they have this disruption. A lot of parents think that young children, because they cannot verbalize and they cannot, they think that they don't understand, they don't feel anything. But that is not true. Children do feel afraid. When they see their parents, when both parents are at home or they're fighting, or the parents look depressed, parents are anxious, children feel afraid. And that'll come up, for young kids in terms of behavioral problems or stomach aches, or they'll act out, or they'll get into trouble. Right? With older kids, it might be a little bit different. They might talk to friends, they might form a group, they might get into deviant things. All kinds of problems can come up because they cannot tolerate, or they cannot conceptualize, or another word that I use, mentalize the kinds of emotions that they're feeling because of external stresses, a lack of management, a lack of communication from external sources as well as internal. So this kind of uncertainty and the loneliness that comes with it, and the sadness, and the and the feeling of the financial insecurity, and the tensions in relationships, and not knowing when it will end and when will life go back to normal, has created a profound traumatizing impact on individuals. And I see that in cycles in people that will cope for a while, and then suddenly they'll hit a slump. And then you'll cope for a while, you'll hit a slump. So coping mechanisms, developing, holding on, thinking, finding different ways to be able to conceptualize it, to be able to understand it, to be able to live with what we have around us. And to, we have, as Gisela pointed out, we have dealt with a lot of traumatizing situations in the past. Think about the children who are children of war, who come, from different situations. People and children have an enormous capacity for resiliency, but we have to build it. We have to build it in the mind and build it in our structures around us. This is where I have the faith that building takes place at both levels, individual levels, family levels, and societal levels.